These are the ruins of an American empire that once ruled the world of photography, and the city that had to reinvent itself after its corporate god died. This is Rochester, New York, where a single company employed more people than the region's current 3 largest employers combined, where getting ahead was as simple as landing a job at Kodak and learning to kiss the right ass, and where the invention of the digital camera that would destroy everything was created in the very basement of the company it would kill. For over a century, Eastman Kodak did not just operate in Rochester, it was Rochester. At its peak in 1982, Kodak employed 60,400 people in the Rochester area alone. That's more workers than the University of Rochester, Rochester Regional Health, and Wegmans Food Markets employ today, combined. The company accounted for half of the area's entire economic activity in Western New York. Walk down any street in Rochester in the 1980s, and 6 out of 10 working people owed their paycheck to one of 3 companies: Kodak, Xerox, or Bausch and Lomb. But Kodak was the king. This was the ultimate company town, built on a foundation of welfare capitalism that George Eastman pioneered in the early 1900s. Eastman did not just want to make cameras and film, he wanted to create an industrial utopia. In 1910, he established a welfare fund for workers' compensation. In 1912, he launched a profit-sharing program for all employees. By 1919, he was selling company stock to workers below market value. In 1928, he introduced life insurance, disability benefits, and retirement plans that were revolutionary for their time. The system was designed to create loyalty, and it worked brilliantly. Employee turnover at Kodak was just 13% in the 1950s, compared to 50% for American manufacturers as a whole. Families would work at Kodak for generations, children following their parents through the yellow brick gates of Kodak Park, a sprawling 120-acre campus that functioned like a city within the city, complete with its own power plant and fire department. George Eastman himself embodied this paternalistic vision. In 1924, he wrote that he wanted to make Rochester, for the thousands of people he had gathered there, the best place on the face of the earth to live and raise their families. He backed those words with unprecedented generosity. During his lifetime, Eastman donated about 75% of his wealth, roughly $2 billion in today's money. His $51 million in gifts transformed the University of Rochester from a modest local college into a top-tier institution. His $22 million to MPMNYT helped reorient it from a local commuter facility to an international leader. He also funded the Rochester Institute of Technology, building an educational infrastructure that would prove crucial to the city's survival decades later. But Eastman's generosity had limits. Employment opportunities were not extended to all Rochesterians. The company almost exclusively hired workers of Anglo-Saxon background, excluding Catholic immigrants, African Americans, and Jews. As one observer noted, the only openings for black people at companies like Kodak were behind a broom. Still, for those who fit Eastman's vision, Rochester became something remarkable. By the 1950s, it was dubbed Smugtown, USA by local journalist Kurt Gerling, who wrote sarcastically that the pattern for success in Rochester was as unburdensome as getting a job at Kodak and learning to pat the proper posteriors. The nickname stuck, capturing both the prosperity and the complacency that defined mid-century Rochester. At its absolute peak in 1996, Kodak was the 4th most valuable global brand, with annual revenues of $16 billion and a market capitalization of $31 billion. The company controlled 95% of the film photography market and 85% of the camera market. Its yellow and red logo was so ubiquitous that the phrase Kodak moment entered the English language as shorthand for any personal event worth preserving. From the simple brownie cameras that democratized photography to the vivid colors of Kodachrome film that defined family memories for generations, Kodak products were woven into American culture. But by then, the seeds of creative destruction had already been planted, ironically, in Kodak's own basement. In 1975, a young Kodak engineer named Steve Sasson was given a broad assignment by his supervisor. He was told to build an electronic camera using a commercially available charge-coupled device. What Sasson created was a clunky 8-pound contraption that captured black and white images at a resolution of 100 by 100 pixels, essentially 0.01 megapixels. The images were stored on a digital cassette tape, and it took 23 seconds to record a single photo. This was the world's first digital camera. When Sasson showed his invention to Kodak executives, their reaction was telling. Sasson later recalled that they simply asked him why anybody would want to take a picture that way when there was nothing wrong with conventional photography. He said there was not a real feeling that they had invented something. The feeling was that this was a very scary look at what could be possible in the future, because the company's entire business model was focused around sensitized goods. Proposing that they not use any of that was not popular. Kodak received the patent for Sasson's digital camera in 1978. But to protect their massive film business, which generated 70% of the company's profits, they buried the technology. It was a rational, short-term decision that would prove catastrophic in the long run, a textbook example of disruptive innovation destroying an established industry from within. The irony is staggering. Kodak did not just fail to adapt to the digital revolution, they invented it, then chose to suppress their own creation. They had a 30-year head start on the technology that would eventually destroy them, and they consciously decided to ignore it. The decline did not happen overnight. Throughout the 1980s and the 1990s, Kodak continued to dominate film photography while quietly laying off workers. Employment dropped from that 1982 peak of 60,400 to about 45,000 in the early 1990s, then to 20,000 in the early 2000s. Each round of layoffs was accompanied by promises that the cuts were necessary to ensure the company's future. Each round was followed by another. The real collapse came with stunning speed in the 2000s. Digital photography did not gradually replace film. It obliterated it in just 4 years of double-digit declines. While Kodak hesitated, competitors like Fujifilm pivoted aggressively to digital, capturing market share that Kodak had dominated for decades. Kodak's film sales fell off a cliff. By 2011, the company employed just 5,129 people in Rochester. On January 19, 2012, shortly after 1 in the morning, Eastman Kodak filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The company that had once been valued at $31 billion listed $5.1 million in assets and $6.75 billion in debts. The filing sent shockwaves through Rochester, but surprisingly many locals shrugged. Jim Sinal, president of High Tech Rochester, called it a non-event to most Rochesterians. After decades of layoffs, the city had already begun preparing for life after Kodak. When Kodak emerged from bankruptcy in 2013, it was a shadow of its former self. Just 2,300 employees in Rochester and 8,800 worldwide. Today, the company employs about 1,200 people locally, down from that peak of 60,400. It is still headquartered in Rochester, still making specialty chemicals and commercial printing equipment, but it is no longer the economic engine that drives this corner of upstate New York. So what replaced Kodak as Rochester's economic engine? The answer is both simpler and more complex than you might expect. The University of Rochester, which George Eastman had generously funded decades earlier, stepped into the void. Today, it is the region's largest employer, with nearly 32,000 local workers. Combined with UR Medicine and affiliates, the university represents the largest private employer in Greater Rochester and upstate New York. 1 in every 14 jobs in Rochester is now tied to the University of Rochester. The institution has a total economic impact of $13 billion statewide and generates $322 million in income, sales, and business taxes. This transition did not happen by accident. Eastman's massive donations had transformed the university into a world-class research institution with particular strength in optics and imaging, fields directly related to Kodak's core expertise. When Kodak collapsed, Rochester already had the intellectual infrastructure to pivot toward high-tech industries. The old Kodak Park itself has been transformed into Eastman Business Park, a 1,200-acre industrial complex that now houses 117 companies from around the world. These tenants operate in emerging industries like biomaterials manufacturing, energy storage, and chemical production. About 5,500 people work at the park today, 1,100 for Kodak and 4,400 for other companies. Many of Rochester's new businesses were founded by former Kodak employees who took their knowledge and started fresh. Companies like OLED Works, Linnell, and Optimax Systems employ more than 700 people collectively. The largest employers spawned from Kodak are companies that bought intact divisions: L3 Harris Space and Intelligence, Carestream Health, and Ortho Clinical Diagnostics, which together employ 4,600 people in the Rochester area. But the transition hasn't been universally successful. While high-skilled workers have thrived in Rochester's new economy, many lower-skilled workers have been left behind. The city now has one of the highest poverty rates among comparably sized United States cities. Roughly 32% of residents live below the federal poverty line, and 16% live in deep poverty. The good-paying manufacturing jobs that once provided middle-class stability for workers without college degrees have largely disappeared. Between 2007 and 2018, real gross domestic product losses from Kodak's decline canceled out growth in all other sectors. While the nation's economy grew more than 16% during that period, Rochester's growth was effectively zero. The city has more jobs than it did at Kodak's peak, but many of those jobs pay less and offer fewer benefits than the positions Kodak once provided. The psychological impact has been profound. Rochester went from being smug town, confident, prosperous, and perhaps a little arrogant, to being a Rust Belt city grappling with its identity. The transition from company town to diversified economy has been painful and ongoing. Mark Zupon, Dean of the University of Rochester's Simon Graduate School of Business, puts it in perspective. "We've been an entrepreneurial community since the days of the Erie Canal. We were the Silicon Valley before there was a Silicon Valley. The big three, Kodak, Xerox, and Bausch plus Lomb, just like in the heyday of Detroit, continued to put us on the map. You gotta stay humble and you gotta stay hungry, because if you don't keep performing, you get relegated to the past." In 2020, Kodak briefly returned to national headlines when it received a $765 million government loan to launch pharmaceutical manufacturing operations. For a moment, it seemed like the company might have found its second act. Dr. Peter Navarro called it one of the greatest second acts in American industrial history. But within weeks, the loan was suspended amid allegations of insider trading and stock manipulation, and the pharmaceutical venture faded away. Today, Kodak continues under Chief Executive Officer Jim Continenza, who remains optimistic about the company's future. He says they are going up, not down, that's for sure. The company focuses on commercial printing, specialty chemicals, and advanced materials, a far cry from its consumer photography roots, but potentially sustainable niches in a digital world. Rochester's story offers both a warning and hope for other company towns facing industrial transition. The warning is clear: no company, no matter how dominant, is permanent. Kodak's managers controlled massive assets, deep intellectual property, highly skilled workers, and one of the world's most recognizable brands. Yet they could not navigate the transition from analog to digital photography fast enough to survive intact. The hope lies in Rochester's ultimate resilience. The decades-long process of industrial transition resulted in a more diverse economy with higher total employment in the greater Rochester area. The key was building on existing infrastructure and skills while developing new industries. Universities played a crucial role by attracting research funding and companies seeking high-skilled workers. Steve Sasson, the inventor of the digital camera that helped destroy Kodak, received the National Medal of Technology and Innovation from President Obama in 2009. His original prototype is now displayed at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, a monument to both innovation and corporate short-sightedness. Bob Cornoyer, who worked for Kodak for 33 years, captures the bittersweet nature of Rochester's transformation. He said, "I drive by parking lots every day that I only wished I could get into back when I started with Kodak. The lots are full again, but with different cars, belonging to different workers in a fundamentally different economy. Rochester today is no longer Smugtown. It is a city that learned the hard way that economic diversity matters more than corporate loyalty, that innovation means nothing without the will to disrupt yourself, and that sometimes the seeds of renewal are planted long before anyone realizes the old tree is dying." George Eastman's philanthropic investments in education became the city's salvation decades after his death, proving that the most important corporate legacy is not jobs or profits. It is the infrastructure of learning and innovation that can outlast any single company. The company that once promised to make Rochester the best place on the face of the earth to live ultimately kept that promise, just not in the way anyone expected.